to discuss the growing threat to Christians worldwide. Lisa Ruth, the former CIA analyst, now with LIGNET.com. Lisa, it is good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Especially in view of this on-again, off-again situation in the Sudan. What do you make of this?
You know, unfortunately, you're dealing with a country that is going to follow its own rules, if you will. You know, again, the president is wanted by the international court right now. He's a criminal. He's an international criminal. There is no conscience. Interestingly, the Constitution protects freedom of religion, but this is not the practice here. And it seems to me, we don't have a lot of details yet, but whatever the reasoning, they are not going to let this woman go.
We were speaking off the air, and as is always the case in intelligence, you have to know the people in charge. What is that you were telling me about the head of the Sudanese government?
The president is currently under indictment by the International Criminal Court. He is accused of war crimes in Darfur for personally ordering killings, torture, rapes, murder. He's someone, he can't leave the country or he will be arrested. So again, when you're dealing with this, what are we looking at?
Well, this remains the question, and we will continue to monitor reports. But it is a troubling situation. That report from the Sudan. Meantime, in Nigeria, news comes this morning, an additional 60 women plus 31 boys kidnapped in much the same situation we saw with the Nigerian schoolgirls taken from Christian schooling in northeast Nigeria. Now here is the video of the boastful head of Boko Haram. And Lisa, we have talked before that the government in Nigeria seems to be compromised, that Boko Haram may have a presence within, for lack of a better term, their military-industrial complex. So does that mean essentially that Nigeria is paralyzed and cannot move in any meaningful way to try and get these women and children back?
It certainly seems that way. You've got 300 women and children, female, who have been kidnapped. 300 people. That's a lot of people. And it caused quite a bit of attention when it first happened. But since then, we haven't heard anything. They have not gotten these back. They continue to attack and arrest. Just last month, there were nuns taken out of their monastery out of their convent who were kidnapped. You know, there is apparently no ability to stop this whatsoever. The Nigerians are absolutely compromised. They have the Boko Haram has much better intel than the Nigerian government. I've seen nothing to suggest that they have the capability to bring these people back or to protect them in the first place.
Lisa, let's go back to the Mideast. Christians living in areas under the occupation of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, what we now know by the acronym ISIS, essentially given three choices. Number one, convert to Islam, pay a tribute and have heavy restrictions on Christian worship, or face the sword. In a statement to Christians, ISA says this, quote, if they reject, they are subject to being legitimate targets. Nothing will remain between them and ISIS other than the sword. And of course, in Mosul yesterday, ISIS stopping motorists distributing the Quran. It leads to the logical question. What has happened to the Christian community, such as it is in the nation of Iraq?
Again, certainly under siege. And Christians have been in Iraq. This is not a new phenomenon since almost the beginning of the time. The oldest church known to exist is right across the border in Syria. You had 20% of the population in the Middle East in the early 20th century was Christian. We're now down to under 5%. In Iraq itself, 200,000 Christians at the time of the U.S. invasion. You're now down to maybe 10,000. No question Christians are being persecuted. Right now, the situation is the place they're safest is in the Kurdistan region, because at least the Kurds as a minority are protecting them. But there's absolutely no question they're going to start destroying churches. They've said so. They're going to destroy all these shrines. There's no safety there. If I was a Christian in Iraq, I'd be on my way out.
Lisa, we see a report issued by Open Doors USA the widely cited 2014 World Watch List. That report highlights and ranks the 50 worst nations internationally in terms of persecuting Christians. One glaring fact that emerges from that report as you see the areas, and obviously those enshrouded in black are the nations, or the darker colored nations are the ones where there are real problems. The report states this: an overwhelming majority of Christian persecution around the world today is being committed at the hands of Muslims of all races, languages, cultures, and socio-political circumstances. So it may sound politically incorrect to many who constantly preach the notion of inclusion, but Islamofascism is on the rise, and corresponding terror and persecution. Now, Lisa, there's been another change of government in Egypt. It appears the new regime is concentrating on rooting out the Muslim Brotherhood to take clear control. Now, we had heard that when the Muslim Brotherhood was in charge, they were really going after the Coptic Christians. Do we expect this behavior to dissipate under the influence of the military in this new regime, or will we see it continue against the Coptics?
Well, one of the ironies around the world and in the Middle East certainly is when a strong man is in power, they actually protect the rights of minorities, strangely enough. It's when that lid comes off that you see this chaos. The question is going to be whether al-Sisi decides to make that a priority, and right now we don't know. However, we do know we haven't seen attacks on Coptic churches like we saw under the Brotherhood. There is so much tension in Egypt right now, though it's very, very difficult to say where that's going to go. One of my concerns with Egypt is because of the crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood, these guys are likely to go underground and start doing some terrorist-like attacks. Who is a likely target? We're back to the Coptic Christians.
So you have that situation in Egypt. There's something else that's come up geopolitically that is aligned with Christian persecution, and certainly our historic ties, starting in the last half of the 20th century with the establishment of the State of Israel. Israel, with air attacks on positions in Syria, now widely attributed to be a response to the killing of a teenager. But is there something more at work given the ongoing civil war in Syria, the Assad regime, and the assets of ISIS dwelling within the geopolitical borders of Syria?
You know, certainly, we've talked before, the domino effect in the Middle East. Everything seems to be related to everything else, for sure. And I do believe that Israel feels very, very tense about the situation. And in terms of the situation with ISIS, this is a group that has absolutely declared it is going to be going after its enemies. One of the obvious enemies is Israel, the state of Israel. Anytime you see that threat rise, you're going to see a retaliation. Israel is taking care of its borders. It's concerned about its borders. You have ISIS taking increasing pathways, Syria, Jordan now. Israel is going to keep watching.
Speaking of Jordan, King Abdullah came to speak to a prayer breakfast on Capitol Hill. He spoke of the pluralism in his nation. Now he's under siege. How much of a threat do you see befalling King Abdullah at the hands of ISIS in about 30 seconds here?
Again, something that if I was in Jordan, very concerned about. Probably you're going to see some strengthening of the border. And again, I'm guessing the other part of that discussion in Washington is, what are we going to do for Jordan?
Well, for in-depth analysis and forecasting on Christians' persecution and the very real geopolitical intelligence you need to know, go to LIGNET.com. Lisa Ruth of LIGNET, we thank you for your input this morning.
Thank you very much.
So you heard Lisa's assessment. What's yours? As Christian persecution continues worldwide, we welcome your comments. Why don't you tweet them to us at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. And America's Forum is coming right back.
This is an